We are officially under 24 hours away from the start of South Carolina's 2025 baseball season. Opening day is officially on the horizon. Hello, everyone. Welcome into another edition of GC Live. I'm your host, Jack Veltri here. And like I said, we are officially on the under 24-hour countdown till South Carolina plays Sacred Heart to begin the pulmonary era for the Gamecocks. It is an exciting time in South Carolina baseball. We've got a lot to talk about on our first preview show of the season, not just previewing the season as a whole, but the weekend at hand with the Sacred Heart Pioneers coming to town. So hope you guys are all doing well. Thank you guys for all tuning in as usual. If you're not already, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Gamecock Central, as well as follow us on all of our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Gamecock Central. You can also go ahead and subscribe to GamecockCentral.com. It's a great opportunity right now to go ahead and do so. We got a lot going on. Obviously, football recruiting is continuing to just go rampant and go on. But we've also got baseball coverage. Obviously, it's been heating up over the last few weeks, but now with the season starting on Friday, got a lot of great stories and action coming over that way. So hope you guys are all doing well. Like I said, EXO is fired up saying, hello, everyone. Let's go. That's the right attitude to have because it is officially college baseball season, and I cannot be any more excited than I already am. But before we get rolling, I want to talk to you guys about our main sponsor right above me here. If you're watching and on live right now, but if you're listening on podcast, I'm talking about Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. If you're in the market to buy a home or you need help with your mortgage, but you just have no idea where to begin and you're looking for some help, Clint Hammond is your guy to get in touch with. He'll help you out through the entire process, take you step by step, and get you on the right track. So if you're interested, give him a call, 803-422-6797. The NMLS number for him is 71597. And you can also go to ClintHammond.com. And again, that's Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. He's been in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years. He's a lifelong Gamecock fan, and he's a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central and all of our GC Live programs. And again, if you're watching on video or on stream right now, you'll see him right above us here with all of his information. So definitely get in touch with Clint if you are interested. So, so Travis checking in saying, hey, everybody, Jack, great question to Coach Paul. Just turned on the softball game. Yeah, South Carolina softball is in action this weekend at Beckham Field. If you guys are wanting to get over there, check out some softball. The ladies are doing very good right now, 5-0 to start the season after sweeping through their first tournament over the weekend last week under Coach Ashley Chastain-Woodard. Definitely a good time to catch some softball right now before baseball starts tomorrow and going into this weekend. EXO says, I watched the Ray Tanner press conference on the Gamecocks channel. Wish I could be there in person tomorrow. Yeah, look, opening day is an exciting time of year. It's always awesome. I think this is going to be – I was going back and trying to figure out what opening day this is for me. I think since because I started covering the team part-time, I guess, at the time because I was a student in college at the time. But my first year covering the team, I think, was 2020. But I think opening day specifically, I think I covered 2020. 2022, I definitely did. And then last year. So this would be this should be my fourth opening day covering South Carolina, but my second on the full-time beat. So I'm excited to get out here, man. I mean, look, it's a different atmosphere compared to not even atmosphere, just a different energy compared to years past. We all know what happened the last few years. If you've been watching South Carolina for long enough, you kind of know how the last few years have gone. And it hasn't been up to standard for South Carolina. And you bring in pulmonary, you bring in a new coaching staff, you bring in some new players, return some old faces like Ethan Petrie, Kennedy Jones, Talmadge LeCroy, etc. And you got a team that, look, people aren't giving you a chance on the outside, but we'll see what happens. This is baseball. I think this is the one sport where it's not like college football where these teams are going to be the top teams and everyone else is kind of going to be. We'll see what they are. You kind of know where your place is in college football. honestly. There are teams like South Carolina football, for instance, this year, had a great season when not a lot of people were expecting it. In college basketball, you know who the good teams are, but it's also very unpredictable once you get to the NCAA tournament in March Madness. With baseball, though, it's unpredictable, I think, the entire year. It's the most unpredictable sport out there. And any given night, literally anything can happen. Like, it's not a given that South Carolina is going to sweep the series against Sacred Heart or win 2 out of 3 or whatever. Heck, Sacred Heart's a good little team who we'll talk about here shortly. But anything can happen in this sport. My point is that just because the coaches and the so-called experts and media out there decided to put South Carolina so low in the preseason polls and rankings and not even include them in the top 25, it is what it is, right? And now you got to go out here and kind of try to prove it over these next few months with the hope of getting back to Omaha, because that is the ultimate goal. And one person that is very high on South Carolina, to no surprise, is their head coach, Paul Mainieri. Here's a soundbite from what Paul had to say, because he spoke to the media earlier today, and we'll hit on some of the main points of what he had to say in his press conference, and then we'll get into the weekend preview and all that. But here's what Paul had to say about the uncertainties of opening day, because it is the most nervous he feels all year, even besides Omaha, honestly, and what his expectations are for this South Carolina team.
Even still, it's the unknown. You're playing these inter-squad scrimmage games. You think you have a pretty good reading on your team. Every hitter is facing an SEC caliber pitcher, and every pitcher is facing an SEC caliber hitter, but they're your own guys, and they get to know each other so well. And then all of a sudden, opening day, there's a team across the field with a different color uniform, and you don't know anything about the players, and it's just the unknown that makes you anxious. But I have a lot of confidence in this team, and I think I've expressed that. A lot of people are not really giving us much of a chance or much credit, going into this season. But personally, I like our team, and I think we're going to put a solid lineup out there. We may not have the 98-mile-an-hour flamethrower on Friday night, but we've got a bunch of guys that I think are going to be very competitive out there on the mound. And we're going to play good defense behind them. We're going to play good fundamentally sound baseball. And, we're going to take it one game at a time. But I would not at all be surprised if we go out there and do something good this year.
And so that was what South Carolina head coach Paul Mainieri had to say today about the expectations going into the season. And look, he's been honest. Like, he's a guy that is going to tell it how it is. He doesn't think these predictions out there are right. And why should he? I mean, South Carolina being picked to finish 14th in the SEC preseason poll. And then you got them not being in the top 25 in any major rankings. I mean, D1 baseball, perfect game, Baseball America, nowhere to be found. On the outside, of course, maybe the next 10 teams or something, but that's not the top 25. And so honestly, like, look, I know there's probably some out there that might have a little bit of doubt about how this thing's going to go. I mean, look, you just got to wait and see how it's going to look on the field. And again, it's not going to be a perfect picture on day one. Like, it wasn't a perfect picture in the preseason, but let me tell you, from watching this team for 3+ weeks in preseason scrimmages, they made a lot of progress. Like, I'm not lying. I'm sure if other people were there, watch, I'm sure other people can attest to it, but it's like this team made progress from the first preseason scrimmage to the most recent one. And I'm going to be honest, I thought they looked about as sharp as they can in that final weekend of scrimmages. And it's good to see that South Carolina was playing clean defense. They scored 11 runs last Saturday with their starting lineup, their projected starting lineup. That is Dylan Eskew, Matthew Becker, Jake McCoy, your weekend rotation. They didn't allow a single run in their outings over the weekend, which is a very good sign going into the season. It shows that you are, I don't want to say peaking at the right time because the season hasn't even really began yet, but it puts you in a good mindset of like, okay, like for the players, they're playing good ball right now. They're feeling good. The defense has been crisp. They're playing very good in all aspects. That's a good feeling to have going into the year. Now you just got to make sure it translates over into the regular season, because we've seen a handful of times before in, like the MLB, for instance, like with spring training. Guys are going to be really good in spring training and then have a really bad April, and they don't really turn it on until May. Then you have guys that have an awful spring training, but have a really good start to the year, and it just clicks. So you never know what can happen because, again, it is literally baseball. And it's more mental than anything, honestly. Like, you're going to fail more than you succeed in the sport. That is just the fact of the matter here. And, some guys are going to have bad days. Some are going to have good. That's baseball. So we'll see what happens. I am very excited, though, to be at Founders Park tomorrow, seeing this team in action. And, I've been honestly kind of speaking very highly of this team. If you go onto GamecockCentral.com on the Insiders Forum, I will be honest, I was very high on what this team was looking like after I saw them in scrimmage action last weekend. And, a lot of people were like, oh, man, well, I'm sure we'll be coming back to this comment and stuff. We'll hold you to it. Like, I feel good about this team. And I know not everyone does, but I see baseball for what it is. Like, I see what a good team looks like, and they've got the makings of it. But again, I know they don't have the frontline starter for an SEC caliber pitching staff from the looks of it. Doesn't mean by the end of the season that won't be the case. But you have a lot of guys that, like, they may not be the big names besides Ethan Petrie that everyone knows across the sport, but by season's end, that could definitely change. And just because some coach that hasn't watched this team at all during the preseason is picking South Carolina to be at the bottom of the barrel doesn't mean they're right. Same deal with the media and all this sort of stuff. So don't always buy too much into what people are saying. Of course, same deal with me. If I'm speaking too highly of this team, then tune that out if you want to. But I'm trying to be as candid and honest as I can, because I think this is a team that is very quality and is doing a lot of the right things necessary that are different than last year or years before. And speaking of differences, Adam, shout out to Adam Ritter for listening. Got a question here. Speaking of differences, what's the difference between SQ last year and this year? His numbers don't jump off the page. Yeah, and look, if you're looking solely at numbers, I know people that haven't watched this team since the Raleigh Regional last season. They're wondering what this team's going to look like, and they're probably first thing they're going to do, they're going to go on to Gamecocks Online or Baseball Reference, wherever you get your stats from, and you're probably going to look at the numbers from last year and be like, oh, I mean, this guy's not good. Dylan SQ had a 4.5 ERA last year, not a good season. What's he going to be this year? And how's he your Friday night starter? He's had a great like preseason, to be honest. He pitched, I think it was 5 shutout innings in his final preseason outing. No walks, 7 strikeouts. The biggest difference I can tell you, Adam, between him last year and this year, and I've spoken in detail with him about this before, and I have a story on GamecockCentral.com that kind of goes in depth. I posted it, I think, last Friday, if you want to go onto the site and check it out for more detail. But Dylan's added a few new pitches to his pitch repertoire. He's now a 5-pitch guy compared to being a guy that maybe threw 2 to 3 different pitches. He's added the cutter. He's got the 4-seam, the changeup, the slider, and I'm forgetting what the last pitch is. But the cutter's the big one that he added, that he worked on with Terry Rooney, and it's made such a big difference. I mean, I'm being honest. He's made guys like, I remember, I think it was maybe the second or first time he threw in the preseason. This guy made Petrie look foolish. He made KJ Scobie look silly at the plate. I mean, he made a lot of different guys kind of look like they were swinging an oar out there. I mean, the ball with the cutter, it's meant really for like a left-handed hitter. It tails inside to where, bats are going to break and guys are going to strike out. That's kind of what it's meant for. But with a right-handed hitter too, since it tails off into the other batter's box, it starts in and then it goes out. So it's a really nice pitch to have. And so that's the big difference with a guy like Dylan SQ. I think he's going to have a solid year, and he seems very confident heading into the season. And, I think he's got the potential to be a good Friday night starter. Again, South Carolina does not have like in years past, the gnomes, like the Will Sanders, the Noah Halls, your Jack Mahoney's, guys like that. You don't have those types of pitchers on your staff that a lot of people know It's the same with other schools that have these big names and stuff. But guess what? Just because these guys may not be big names or well known right now doesn't mean Dylan Eskew, Matthew Becker, McCoy, that can't be a solid 3-man rotation throughout the season. So I think they're in good position now. One guy that won't be in the rotation, and this was already known, but Eli Jersenbeck did not make the weekend rotation. He had a really rough preseason, and it does seem like there's a little bit more context as to why that may be. Earlier today, I did ask during the press conference, I asked Maneri about Jersenbeck and what kind of role he envisions for him since he's not in the rotation to start the year, whether it's out of the bullpen or in a midweek spot, and why he kind of did struggle throughout the preseason. And here's what Maneri had to say on Jers.
Jack, I really don't know how to answer this question because Eli actually went to see a doctor yesterday, and he's having a little bit of some issues right now. We're not really sure what exactly the problem is, but he's not going to be available to us certainly for this weekend and probably next week. So it would probably explain why some of his struggles were happening in these first 3 weeks. But I'd rather not talk any more about it because I don't really know what the diagnosis is. And, I really feel for the kid because obviously he missed all of last year, and now we got to just hope and pray for the best for him. But when I have an update on it, I'll let y'all know.
And so that is what Paul Maneri had to say about Eli Jersenbeck, who is going to miss not just this weekend against Sacred Heart, but he will also miss what seems to be next week as well. So the earliest South Carolina could get him back is potentially in 2 weeks. And again, we don't know exactly what the issue is per se. Again, in case you missed that audio and you're just joining us, appreciate you guys tuning in also, by the way. Jers went to go see a doctor yesterday, and we just don't know the extent of it beyond that. We do know he's had elbow issues in the past. Yet he's coming off Tommy John surgery, hasn't pitched in a game since, I think, May 7th, 2023. And I think maybe it's something with that. I don't want to assume, but it's like, it doesn't sound ideal. And so you hope you don't have him out for the year because, look, or even longer or shorter, whatever it is. You hope he's back as soon as possible because, look, he didn't have a good preseason, but he still can be that guy that had a sub-3 ERA when he was a freshman at South Carolina and showed really good stuff. I mean, this guy had, I think, 36 strikeouts and 6 walks as a freshman. That's the type of stuff South Carolina needs. And I remember hearing Mark Kingston talk about Jersenbeck when he was a freshman with Friday night ace stuff. We haven't seen that so far this preseason, and it doesn't look like we're going to be seeing it anytime soon. But you hope he's able to get back soon enough because if you're South Carolina and you want to go on a run this year, you got to be able to have him at full strength, and you need him to be one of your guys this year. Not saying he needs to be a frontline starter, but he's got to be impactful in some way, whether that's out of the bullpen or in a rotation spot. Whatever the case might be, you're going to need him, and we'll see what his timetable is. But even if he were healthy, he wouldn't be starting this weekend. And speaking of which, Hutch is asking a question. Got a question, who will probably be starting pitcher against Sacred Heart? Yeah, so it is Dylan Eskew on Friday, Matthew Becker on Saturday, and Jake McCoy on Sunday. And going for Sacred Heart on the mound, we've got right-handed pitcher on Friday, Joey Tromboli. I'm trying to pronounce these northern names, but Joey Tremblay is going to be starting on the mound on Friday for the Pioneers. He went 3-2 last year with a 4.28 ERA. On Saturday, it's going to be right-handed pitcher Elijah Foster, who went 5-1 last year with a 4.53 ERA. And then on Sunday, you've got TBA pitching. And we'll get into a little bit more of Sacred Heart in a little bit, but that is the rotation matchups for this weekend. We've also got a question about what's up with Roman Kimball. And this comes from Travis Weathers, who asks, what's going on with Roman? Would we expect to see him relieved this year? It is an interesting question because Roman, he had an up and down preseason. Look, he got hit around a little bit, gave up a few homers, but there were times where his stuff looked really good. Like he struck out some guys. he looked fine at times and held his own. Looking at the stats here, he gave up 7 runs in 5 1/3 innings, 10 strikeouts, 5 walks, 3 homers allowed. So a little bit of a mixed bag. I don't expect him to be a starter for South Carolina this year. I think he's probably going to be best suited to be one of those long relief guys that comes out of the bullpen and could give you some innings. He could also be a guy that maybe pitches midweeks. I'm not sure exactly, but we're gonna see what happens with Roman. And he's, again, just like Jerzembeck, just like a lot of these other guys. Roman's one of these guys that, MLB scouts are high on him for being a guy that could potentially, be drafted in the future. We'll see, but he's got to go out there and prove it this year. And he got invited to the draft combine and stuff. And again, it seemed like it went well for him, but he's got to put it together this year, because you look back at last year, he was one of your weekend rotation starters to open the year. But progressively, as the season went on, he kind of just didn't have it as much. And it got to a point where he didn't throw, I think it was like May 9th it was the Georgia series, all the way until the last game of the SEC tournament that South Carolina played against LSU, where you had to pitch him, and he started and gave you 4 quality innings, honestly, if not for some errors and stuff that kind of led to his final line looking a lot worse than it was. But Roman's shown that he can pitch well. It's just he's got to find that consistency and that right role that is going to best suit him. And I believe Maneri and Terry Rooney and staff are going to be able to figure that out. But I would expect Roman to pitch this weekend at some point. I expect a lot of different guys to get looks this weekend. As the rotation now, we really won't know what it looks like for sure until SEC play. Again, a lot could change. Guys could struggle. Other guys could step up. We'll have to see. But for now, it's going to be SQ Friday, Becker Saturday, McCoy Sunday. I think that's the right way to go, and we'll see what happens. EXO says, that's what I'm hoping with Maneri. We had too many kids not get closer to their ceiling. Hope we'll see more this year. Yeah, totally right. Again, I not to fault the old coaching staff here, but it just felt like you had a lot of good pieces on last year's team, and you just couldn't get there. And I feel like there's a lot of untapped potential that is left up for the taking here. And it's on South Carolina with Maneri, Rooney, Monty Lee, John Hendry, the entire staff and the players to get it right and to figure it out. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see a lot of these guys step up into big roles and see if they can live up to their potential. Because a guy like Jake McCoy, who Maneri is very high on, was a guy that didn't pitch at all until the Ole Miss series for his college debut last year. And he was a guy that didn't see a ton of innings. Now he's being counted on as one of your 3 weekend starters. And if he can kind of figure out, the big thing with him is that Maneri was saying he's got electric stuff, some of the best stuff on the team. Like Ray Tanner was chatting with Maneri recently, watching McCoy pitch, and he was so impressed with what he saw. And so McCoy's got the stuff, but it's just, what happens when you get in a jam? Can you pitch out of it? And how does that affect your outing? Because that's the big thing. I think we're still waiting to see how that looks with a guy like McCoy, but feel good about this rotation right now. Hutch asks, have another question, Jack? Do you watch Roman Kimball's YouTube channel? I've watched some videos. I did a story on Roman and his return from Tommy John, which included the whole YouTube side of things, because when he was down with TJ, a big part of his 2023 season, though he didn't pitch, was kind of documenting it. And so I kind of was talking with him about that this time last year, and did a whole story on GamecockCentral.com about it. So definitely cool YouTube channel he's got there, but I haven't really watched it in a bit. I don't think he's posted either in like 4 or 5 months. I think I was looking recently and didn't see he's posted anything. So haven't heard from Roman much at all lately in media availability or anything. The media hasn't gotten to talk to him lately, but we'll see. Hoping Roman does have a good year though, and we'll see what happens. But let's get a little bit into. We'll actually answer one more question, and then we'll get into a bit of the preview for the weekend. Travis asks, what about Tyler Pitzer? Haven't heard much about him either, but that Game 3 versus Vandy was nuts. Yeah, you're totally right. That Game 3 start versus Vanderbilt last year that Pitzer started was incredible. Some of the best stuff I've seen all year. It is looking like, we'll see how it looks this weekend, but it looks like Pitzer's going to be one of those guys that's used in the late innings. potentially as your 8th inning guy to turn things over to what seems to be your closer with Brendan Sweeney. So that seems to be your setup man being Pitzer and your closer being Brendan Sweeney. But we will have to see how it plays out. All right, let's get into the weekend here. Of course, as I've mentioned all stream long, South Carolina begins action tomorrow afternoon, 4 p.m., Founders Park, opening day, Sacred Heart coming to town. And this is a team that very much well could be South Carolina's toughest non-conference weekend challenge outside of the obvious being Clemson, who I personally think could be an Omaha team this year. But the Pioneers, they are a very solid team coached by Pat Egan, who's going to be in his 3rd season with the program. Year 1 in 2023 was not very good. Sacred Heart went 28-30. They went 17-13 in the conference, which is not bad. That was in the Northeast Conference, which will be important for the next point I bring up here in a second. And then last year, Sacred Heart had a phenomenal year, 35-23, 25-8 conference record. They finished first in the conference standings, which gave them the Northeast Conference regular season title. And that was their first regular season championship under Egan. And it was a great year they had. And, this Sacred Heart team could present some challenges for South Carolina in a lot of different ways. And with Sacred Heart, they are now a part of the MAC conference. That is with 2 A's. That is the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. And so they are joining that conference this year for baseball. But you look at the Sacred Heart team, I think the number one thing that stands out, and it's a little bit of a concern when I look at it from a South Carolina standpoint, Sacred Heart stole 118 bases last year in 157 attempts. That is insane to think about. I mean, this is a team that if they get on base, they're going to try and swipe some bases. And I think my big concern with that is you look at who's catching behind the plate. Talmadge LeCroy has certainly earned the starting catching job. And Maneri was saying today that he'll catch the first 2 games of the weekend, and then they'll figure out who's catching game 3 on Sunday. But it seems like it's either going to be Ryan Bakes or Max Crawford, but it's a little too close to call right now, which is a little bit surprising to hear, considering that we're this close to the season starting and there's still not a definitive backup catcher. But of course, roles can change throughout the year, and they still got a few days to kind of figure it out. But that's the thing I worry about with this weekend is Sacred Heart. They're going to get on base every now and then. I was a little bit worried about guys giving up stolen bases, whether it's pitching or catchers. It's not just LeCroy, it's other guys too. But I'm a little bit worried that if a team gets on the base pass, they are going to be stealing on this team. And you got to hope if it's LeCroy catching games 1 and 2, he needs to be on the money with his throws down to second base, third base. I mean, that's what helped so much last year was having a guy like Cole Messina behind the plate, because not only was he such a great hitter, but he really did a nice job of managing the pitching staff, and he was also a great catcher behind the plate to where he's throwing out runners and stuff. Like I remember that Raleigh Regional, James Madison, a team that was really prone to running on the base paths. Messina kind of shut that stuff down for most of the day, and he's a really solid catcher, as we all know. And now he's with the Colorado Rockies organization and stuff. So you got big shoes to fill. Talmadge is a guy that South Carolina is very high on, but now you got to go out here and do it. He was one of the better hitters in the preseason, was fine behind the plate, obviously had some, some mistakes every now and then, like guys would steal on him. There'd be some pass balls, all the normal stuff you're going to deal with as a catcher. But you just can't be allowing a team like Sacred Heart to be stealing at will, essentially. And that's where you can get into some trouble, because if it's like you steal second, you steal third, it's only 1 out, you hit a ground ball in the infield, that's a run scoring right there. So got to be able to limit the amount of times these teams are stealing on the base pass. But Sacred Heart is definitely no exception to that. And you look at this team, they've got Tim McGuire returning, and he hit 326 last year with 12 doubles and 37 RBIs in 2024. And honestly, I mean, in fact, all 3 position players that are back for this year hit over 300 last year. And you got Zach Kovalchuk, who hit 326 last year. You also got McGuire, like I said. And then you got Alex Ungar, who hit 314. And I mentioned the pitching before. You've also got your closer back, Owen McDonald, had a team best 9 saves in 2024. So this is a team that is going to be tough, honestly. I think this is going to be a hard-fought weekend. It's not going to be as easy as South Carolina just automatically sweeps. You're going to have to work for it. But that's the thing. That's the thing about baseball, is that you never know what can happen. But I do think, I'll get to my predictions here shortly, I think South Carolina is in a good position to have a good weekend. But it's like I said before, guys got to live up to the potential that they have that needs to be unlocked in the regular season. And you got to play clean baseball. You got to play good defense. Timely hitting is going to be a big deal this weekend. I don't know if the ball is going to be flying out of the ballpark, and the weather is a little bit iffy this weekend. Tomorrow looks fine. I think I saw the high is going to be 57 degrees, and then the low, it'll get into about the 40s by late afternoon. Yeah, the high tomorrow will be sunny. It'll be 53 degrees. The low is going to be 36. By the late afternoon, it'll be in the 40s. But then the rest of the weekend, it's looking a little bit unclear as to what's going to be going on. And actually, Paul Mainieri did speak. This will be the last audio clip we share from Mainieri here. He talked about the weather situation this weekend, because I know a lot of people have questions. I've gotten a few today about what's the deal. Is South Carolina going to have a doubleheader this weekend? Are they going to get all 3 games in? Here's what Mainieri had to say about the weather circumstances this weekend.
I actually just got a weather report that said that the rain might be out of here Sunday morning by like 9:30. So we're going to meet at 5:15 today after practice is over with Brian Condi and Jeff Davis, who is our facilities director and sport administrator. Brian is the event manager, and he's got access to some really good weather people. I don't even know if I'm allowed to name them. I haven't even heard of them, to be honest with you. But all of a sudden, we've got some people telling us that there's some hope for Sunday. I've been worrying about it all day. So we have not had any conversations with Sacred Heart, but certainly we'd like to get the games in. But there's a chance that the weather could be bad Saturday night into Sunday morning, and we may not be able to play a doubleheader on Saturday anyway. I actually just got...
So that is what Paul Mainieri had to say about the weather situation this weekend. So from what he basically said, South Carolina and Sacred Heart are going to try to get all three games in this weekend. How they'll get them in, we got no clue. I've seen some other teams around the SEC, like Mississippi State, Kentucky. They're already going to be playing doubleheaders on opening day. South Carolina, from the looks of it, will not be doing that. And we'll hopefully know more here pretty soon about the situation this weekend. I'm not going to speculate too much on this, but I do have a feeling, like, honestly, I've looked at the radar and the weather a little bit, the percentages of precipitation and stuff. There is a window on Sunday to get the game in. Like, after the morning, you should be fine to play your noon first pitch. And then it's a little bit more iffy, I think, on Saturday, because it's like 40% chance throughout the day. But I think South Carolina and Sacred Heart will be able to get all 3 games in this weekend. It just really depends on what how the weather looks. And I really do hope, I know it's going to be cold out this weekend. It's going to be cold next weekend too, when Milwaukee comes to town. But I think for South Carolina, like, get these 3 games in. Hopefully a good crowd shows up for the one sunny day tomorrow, and then we'll see about the rest of the weekend. I know women's basketball is on Sunday and stuff, and that obviously will probably be a sellout crowd, all likelihood, and we'll see how the baseball crowd turns out and stuff. But yeah, I hope you guys are able to get out to Founders Park. And the other big thing going on this weekend over at the Yard is, I mentioned Founders Park. Ray Tanner Field at Founders Park will be the new name of the building, the house that Ray Tanner built, legendary South Carolina head coach. And here's a little teaser for you guys. Tomorrow morning, around, I think, maybe about 8:30 a.m., that's my goal, to get it up. Got a very cool story. Been talking to some former guys on the team and stuff from Ray's tenure at South Carolina, and got a really good story coming out tomorrow morning on that, with some stories from the guys who were around Coach Tanner the most and stuff. So If you're on the site tomorrow, be sure to check it out. Maybe around like 8:30 a.m. is the goal to get it up. So that's a little teaser there, but it'll be a very interesting story. But anyway, South Carolina is set to honor its legendary head coach on Saturday with the dedication ceremony for Ray Tanner Field at Founders Park. I'm sure some of you guys have seen it on Twitter and stuff, and it's been floating around the logo behind the plate. I will say I was in person to check it out today for myself because I wasn't at the scrimmage on, I think it was on Monday or Tuesday earlier this week to see it. It does look a little bit small. I'm not going to lie. I'm sure some of you guys are going to be probably complaining about that when you see it at the ballpark tomorrow or on Saturday. But it's a little bit tiny. Not going to lie. It might be a little bit hard to read, but it's pretty cool. It's like Ray Tanner's signature, and then you got Ray Tanner Field at Founders Park with 2 Gamecock logos on the side. So very cool. It's going to be a great time, and I'm looking forward to being at the yard and just seeing it all. And my plan is to also document some of this stuff. I know if you guys have been following me for a little bit now or just following along with Gamecock Central for a bit, you'll know that I did some behind-the-scenes football vlogs last season in 2024 with Gamecock football and all that. That was always fun. I think I'm going to be doing the same thing this year, and I'm going to be doing that I'm definitely going to be doing it for road series this season. Like, my plan is to do it for Mississippi State, Arkansas, like all these cool places that I have never gotten to see in person for myself, and I look forward to sharing it with you guys. But my plan is to be doing it all weekend long with this being such an important weekend in South Carolina baseball. Definitely looking forward to it, and it's going to be a great time. But yeah, Saturday is Ray Tanner Day at the ballpark. So rain or shine, hope to see you guys there. And if you're not able to make it there, I will plan on having a behind-the-scenes vlog up at some point over the weekend, maybe Monday. We'll see. But yeah, so again, it is going to be a very exciting weekend at the ballpark. My last points on this, and I'll get into my predictions here for the weekend in general here soon. I think this is going to be the start of something very interesting for South Carolina. You got a new head coach. You got a lot of new faces on your team. I'm really liking the way this group has come along. I think the pitching staff is in a good spot. You know, we had questions going back to the fall of who are your 3 guys going to be? It's probably going to be Eli Jersenbeck on Friday and then everyone else. It hasn't worked out that way, but you've got 3 capable starting pitchers right now who I think could do very well for this team this year. It could surprise a lot of people. I think at the plate, you're going to have a nice contact-oriented team. You're going to have Ethan Petry, Kennedy Jones, guys like that are going to hit home runs. I think Nathan Hall is another guy, Nolan Naraki. Those are your guys potentially that could reach double digits. Maybe if you are lucky, maybe get about 15 homers from those guys this year. We'll have to see. That would be very nice if you could, especially from the other guys outside of Petry that haven't been able to do that before in the past. But I think with this team, you're going to see a lot of contact. I know everyone talks about how much South Carolina has been home run or strikeout. You're going to see strikeouts. You're going to see homers. So don't shoot the messenger here. I'm just sharing my opinion on what I've been seeing. But I think we're going to see 1 through 9, a team that can definitely go toe-to-toe with anyone. And I think this weekend is going to be, obviously, it's not the final product. It's once SEC play starts, and we'll see how they do in that. That'll be the real test. But this is a good way to hopefully start the year playing a Sacred Heart team that I think you should be able to beat. And then defensively, I think you're a lot better this year. We'll see what happens with the catcher position and how that looks over the weekend. And Michael Lynn mentions KJ Scobie here. I think he's going to be very solid at third base for the Gamecocks this year. The only freshman starting on opening day in the projected lineup. And we'll see what the final lineup looks like tomorrow. But, 1 through 9, it should look something along the lines of you've got who am I thinking of here? Losing my train of thought for whatever reason. You got Nathan Hall leading off. Then you got Henry Kazmar hitting second. And then you got Ethan Petry in the 3 hole, Kennedy Jones in the 4, Talmadge LeCroy in the 5. And then you got something like KJ Scobie, Blake Jackson, guys like that, Nolan Naraki, guys like that hitting towards the bottom of your order. And Michael asked, is Blake Jackson leading off? And no, it seems like he's going to be hitting in the 9 hole this year for South Carolina. And I do think it'll either be in left field or as the designated hitter, depending on what happens with Kennedy Jones. But I think that Blake Jackson is probably your left fielder this season, at least to start the year. Though Kennedy Jones can definitely hold his own. I forgot Dalton Mayshore too. It would be Dalton Mayshore probably in the 6 hole, Nolan Naraki in the 7. Then you got KJ Scobie and then Blake Jackson. So that's probably your 1 through 9 this season. And I think it's a very good lineup. One that, especially 7, 8, and 9, those guys had a great weekend of scrimmages last week. So excited to see what those guys can do. And I think it has the makings of a good year. All right. Before we get out of here, let's talk some predictions. I'm not going to give you guys my record predictions and all that stuff. That's number one. That's way too hard to even analyze because the SEC is going to be insanely tough this year. And honestly, I don't know if people would even like my predictions if I did that sort of thing with record and whatnot. But I'll share some general ones as well as how I think things are going to go this weekend. Number one, I think South Carolina ends up sweeping this series with Sacred Heart this weekend. It is going to be tough. It is going to be a grind. Sacred Heart is no joke. Do not get that twisted at all. They are the best team outside of Clemson that South Carolina will play in weekend series and non-conference play without question. Milwaukee, Morehead State, not exactly on the same level as Sacred Heart, a team that won their conference regular season title last year in the Northeast Conference. So I have South Carolina sweeping the series. I think these games will kind of come down to the wire a little bit maybe. I think they'll blow out probably 2 of the games, then maybe one of the games will be a little bit closer. But I do think South Carolina ultimately sweeps the series this weekend. All right. As for more general predictions this year, and again, this I haven't really thought too much about it, but kind of just because again, it's just so much to think about. But I know everyone probably wants South Carolina, obviously go to Omaha year 1. I don't know if that's necessarily realistic, but at least from my standpoint. But for me, I think there is a good chance I'd be shocked if South Carolina didn't make a regional at the very least. I don't think they host this year. I'll be honest. I think it's going to be tough in an SEC that is very, very good from top to bottom. And again, this is also me kind of banking on the fact that South Carolina is going to have a good season. And I think a decent record sample size for conference play, at least. I think you're probably going to end up probably being somewhere about maybe like 14-16, 15-15, maybe 16-14. I think a lot of people would probably take that considering last year you went 13-17 in conference play and had some really rough stretches. Well, let's also keep in mind, conference play is going to be brutal this year. That is where things could really start tripping up for South Carolina if they're not careful. And what's the rule of thumb in every weekend series? When you're at home, win the series. If you're on the road, win a game. That's all you got to do if you're South Carolina, and you'll have a pretty good record by the end of conference play through 30 games. But you play LSU, Tennessee, Florida, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. Am I missing anyone? I mean, these are very, very good teams that you're going to be playing throughout conference play. Kentucky as well. It's going to be very tough, and Auburn too. And I think South Carolina got the brute of the brutal. I think the most brutal stretch of teams to play throughout conference play. But I do think South Carolina could go out here and win some of these series, like Ole Miss, Kentucky. Florida is at home this year. You go to Arkansas, you go to Kentucky, you go to Mississippi State. Those series, you have to, and Auburn you go to as well. And I think there's one more you got to go to this year. But you gotta be able to at least win a few of these series here. Tennessee's at home, Florida's at home, Ole Miss is at home. I think you have to win the home series. Find a way to win a road series or two. Just don't get swept. That's the big thing, and I think you'll have a decent enough record in conference play to contend for a regional seed as a host. But I think more likely this is probably going to be a 2-seed team this year. And I don't know what regional they'll go to. Don't ask me that. That's probably insanely hard to predict. And also you get LSU at home in the final regular season series of the season, the pulmonary reunion, if you will, in Columbia. But I think a 2 seed is about realistic for me, my prediction. I think South Carolina will win a regional. And I think they'll get to a super. And I think that's where probably the season ends. But I think that's a very good year for South Carolina, all things considered, with where you were this time last June in Raleigh, getting ready to fire your head coach and not knowing what the future was going to look like. And it's still a little bit unclear of how things will turn out this season. Again, just because I think they're going to go to a super doesn't mean it will happen. Maybe they end up going to Omaha. Maybe they finish worse. Who's to say? That's the beauty in predictions, though. My answers are not always the right ones, but I try to give y'all my best perspective and predictions as possible. So we will see what happens. But all the fun starts tomorrow afternoon, 4 p.m. on SEC Network Plus. South Carolina will host Sacred Heart in a 3-game weekend series. Weather permitting, they should be able to get all 3 games in. But again, we'll see what happens. And we'll have all updates on GamecockCentral.com throughout the weekend with the weather, live game updates, game stories, press conferences, the whole 9 yards. Post-game videos. Leaving the Yard is coming back again this year. And that is my post-game video recap series. If you guys follow along with football, basketball, anything on social media, even on YouTube here, you'll know that I've been doing something like that for a little bit now, recapping games for y'all. And then on Sunday, we'll be going live for GC Live Sunday Reset. Planning to do that after the weekend series ends between South Carolina and Sacred Heart, and we'll share full thoughts from the weekend. And then we'll get ready for another week of baseball with 2 midweek games next week, and then you get Milwaukee at home for your second weekend series of the year. So, again, 4 p.m. first pitch. Tomorrow, you've got, 2 p.m. on Saturday, and then noon on Sunday at the ballpark at Founders Park, Ray Tanner Field at Founders Park. So, really looking forward to the season, y'all, and I hope you guys are too. So, that is going to do it for now. Again, if you're not already, subscribe to our YouTube channel, just Gamecock Central. Be sure to give this stream a thumbs up wherever you're watching, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, you name it, your podcast platforms too, if that's a thing where you can give it a thumbs up. Would really appreciate it. Definitely helps out a lot. So thanks, guys, so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys on Sunday Reset. Take care, y'all. Happy opening weekend. We are finally here. Let's go.